Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and the 2017 college football season is rapidly approaching, and we are here to get you ready for the season as we preview the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Here's a look at what we have in store for you guys in this season's preview. We'll take a look at some of the incoming talent in our recruiting roundup. We'll hand out some superlatives, including our preseason all-conference team in our conference preseason awards segment. And we will also take an early look at some of the 2018 NFL draft prospects that you want to keep an eye on this season. But first, let's kick things off by taking you around the Missouri Valley Football Conference as we go into our 4-minute offense. The reason why the Missouri Valley Football Conference has been consistently good for so long is because they get strong quarterback play from a lot of their teams. And whether someone to accept it or not, the QB position is a leadership position. And when you're strong at the position that handles the ball every play, you're going to get positive results. So when you look across the MVC, you see guys like Easton Stick, Chris Streveler, Taryn Christian, Hunter Wells, amongst others. You can understand why this is one of the toughest conferences in college football. Let's build off the first point with this one right here. When you have strong quarterback play, your teams will be good and you'll have more than your fair share of representation in the FCS playoffs. And I know a lot of people tend to think that the Missouri Valley Conference gets overrated at times, but there's no denying the fact that they do put together some quality wins, and albeit some against conference foes, to get into the playoffs. Last year, we saw the Missouri Valley Football Conference have 4 teams represent the conference in the tournament, which was down from the 5 that they had in 2015, which is still an absurd number. The old saying goes, iron sharpens iron, and it's so true when speaking about this conference in prepping and putting quality teams into the playoffs. Speaking of the strength of this league, they are also well known for knocking off FBS opponents. Last year, there were 10 FCS over FBS victories, with the Missouri Valley Conference having 4 of those, including a 23-21 North Dakota State victory over 13th ranked Iowa. Now this year, America's favorite upset king, NDSU, doesn't have an FBS opponent on the schedule, but 7 other teams in the conference do, including a rematch between Northern Iowa and Iowa State, where the Panthers knocked off the Cyclones 25-20 last season. Indiana State has a new head coach this year in Kurt Mallory, who played his college ball at the University of Michigan. He was a longtime defensive coach at 8 different programs, most recently the University of Wyoming, where he was a defensive back coach for the past 2 seasons. I really like this hire for the Sycamores because Mallory has been a coordinator before, but he is really in tune with the technical and development aspect of the position. I think he will do a fine job in Terre Haute. In college football, you're only as good as your ability to recruit and develop the players that you bring into your program. And this past signing day, there was no shortage of future impact players added to the conference. So let's hit the recruiting trail to see how well these teams recruited this past offseason. Adding talent along the front 7 was a priority for the Redbirds this offseason. Illinois State brought in 7 defensive linemen or linebackers this signing day. In Jalen Sutton, they're getting a quick twitch athlete that has room to add about 20 to 25 pounds onto his frame without losing speed and quickness. I think he's going to be a tremendous player for head coach Brock Spack. Rashawn Mosley is a 280-pound defensive lineman that moves extremely well. Where he'll ultimately end up along the defensive line is still up in the air, but a guy with that type of athleticism will thrive anywhere he's placed. Missouri State landed a quarterback in Peyton Huslick, who's a JUCO transfer that had his team in the title game last year. He's very athletic and is a nightmare for opposing defensive coordinators to game plan against because of how much damage he can do once he escapes the pocket, both as a runner and as a passer. And he also has a great chance to start for the Bears this season. Northern Iowa does a sound job in bringing in talented front 7 players on defense, and I really like linebacker Kendrick Sunken. The 6'2", 240-pound backer from Hampton, Iowa, plays the position like it's supposed to be played. He doesn't shy away from contact. He's always looking to hit and is also a really good sideline-to-sideline player. I also like how he's able to get through the trash on a consistent basis. North Dakota State landed an impressive prospect in Noah Gendorf. He's 6'6", 235, played both H-back and quarterback in high school, and has the physical toughness that you want from the tight end position. I think his experience handling the ball as a quarterback and also as a runner will give new Bison offensive coordinator Courtney Messingham a ton of flexibility in utilizing his skill set. I think he's going to be a really good player for North Dakota State. I believe Reggie Crawford has a chance to see the field early for South Dakota. Crawford shows the ability to go up and high point the football, but also has the speed to separate and pull away from defenders. He's able to get to his top end speed pretty quickly, which puts a ton of pressure on defenders and forces safeties to take poor angles. South Dakota State will always be strong along the line of scrimmage because they constantly bring in quality recruits like John Grutzmacher. The 6'8", 310-pound offensive tackle has good functional strength for the position, and once he cleans up his technique, he'll be a mainstay on the Jackrabbits offensive line. I was highly impressed with the film of Raekwon Lindsey. For a high school player, he has the technique and the savvy of a college senior. Once you get him in the weight room and get him acclimated to college nutrition, I think the sky is the limit for the 6'3", 235-pound defensive end out of Portage, Indiana. Western Illinois recruit James Bailey Jr. was a high school quarterback that will be making a transition to a full-time running back as a Leatherneck, and what you saw from his high school film is a guy that has a good feel for the running game past the first level, which is why I think he'll probably redshirt this year to get him to master that part. And once he does that, I think they'll have a solid prospect on their hands. If you have corners with ball skills, you're going to be very tough to beat. Melvin Jackson has the ball skills of a wide receiver, which means once the ball is in the air, he has just as much of a chance to come down with it as does the wideout. He's heading into a great situation at Youngstown State that is looking to replenish some of the talent that they lost on the back end. This conference is filled with talented players across the board, and what better way to illustrate that than to unveil our 2017 preseason all-conference team. Taking a look at the offensive side of the ball, and our all-purpose player DJ Davis of Southern Illinois was nothing short of spectacular last season as a freshman. A 5'8", 185-pound Saluki finished 2016 with 217 yards rushing, 212 yards receiving with 2 touchdowns, and led the Salukis in kickoff return yardage with 781, bringing one back to the house for 6. And there's also some really good offensive line talent on here as well, with Jackrabbit teammates Jacob Owensorge and Charlie Harmon. And speaking of Jackrabbit teammates, quarterback Taryn Christian and wide receiver Jake Winicky were outstanding last year. The junior signal caller threw for over 3,700 yards and 30 touchdowns to only 9 interceptions. Winicky led the team in receiving yards with over 1,300 and receiving touchdowns with 16, including this game winner against North Dakota State. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, and defensive lineman Dalton Keene of Illinois State was impressive last year, finishing with 7.5 TFLs and 3.5 sacks, earning himself second-team All-Missouri Valley Football Conference honors in the process. Linebacker Nick DeLuca returns to the Bison lineup after missing virtually the entire season. He also returns to our preseason all-conference team, and he has some company on this list as he's joined by 3 other Bison as well. Brett Taylor of Western Illinois is one of the best linebackers in the nation. Last season, the 6'2", 230-pound Leatherneck accumulated 134 tackles, 8.5 TFLs, and 4 sacks. And this is coming off a 144 tackle and 11 TFL 2015 season. Taylor is one of the best players in Western Illinois history and is looking to become a 2-time All-American. Wrapping up our preseason All-Missouri Valley Football Conference team with a look at the specialists, kicker Jerry Nunez was clutch as a freshman last year, connecting on 15 of 18 of his field goal attempts with a cool 7 of 8 between 40 and 49 yards. It's time to take a look at the Missouri Valley Conference's best in our conference superlative segment. The best group of quarterbacks, in my opinion, go to the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. We talked earlier about how great of a season Taryn Christian had last year in his first full season of starting. The Jacks also have 2 really good backups in senior Dalton Douglas and redshirt freshman Cannon Nelson. I think Nelson has star potential and will just have to wait his turn behind the talented Christian. We have a tie for the best group of running backs in the conference between the aforementioned Jackrabbits and North Dakota State. The Jacks have a deadly 2-headed monster with Brady Mangarelli and Isaac Wallace. The duo combined for over 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns last season. And you want to know how deep the Bison backfield was last year? They lost guys of the caliber of King Frazier and Chase Morlock and are still one of the stronger cores in the conference. Both Lance Dunn and Bruce Anderson are tremendous tailbacks that fit the mold of what the Bison like in their running backs, one-cut downhill runners with great acceleration. We have another tie for the best receiving core. This time it's between South Dakota State and Missouri State, and the Jackrabbits have two of the top receiving options in the entire FCS in wide receiver Jake Wieneke and tight end Dallas Goedert. Goedert was particularly spectacular last season after hauling in 92 receptions and 11 touchdowns for over 1,200 yards. Missouri State's receiving core is built similarly to South Dakota State. The Bears have talent at both receiver and at tight end. They're very deep at tight end. Wide receiver Malik Earl led the Bears in receiving with 534 yards, and when you toss in Deion Holloman and tight end Eric Furmanek, you have the makings of a trio that give the Missouri State faithful hope each and every Saturday. The Jackrabbits stand alone with the best offensive line in the conference. 4 starters return up front on what was one of the more diverse and explosive offenses in the FCS. That type of continuity only bodes well for them to have an encore performance in 2017. North Dakota State has been one of the more consistent defensive football teams in the FCS, and a lot of it has to do with the consistency of their defensive line. This unit is led by defensive end Greg Menard, who finished with 15.5 TFLs and 11 sacks. Defensive tackle Nate Tangway shows a ton of quickness for a 6'4", 293-pound lineman, which is a big reason why he finished with 4.5 sacks last year. This is a deep and talented group from end to end. We have another tie for the best linebacking core between North Dakota State and Western Illinois. The Bison get back one of the nation's best in Nick DeLuca. His ability to play inside or out makes him special. They also have a really good one in Matt Plank, who finished the season with 76 tackles and 5.5 TFLs. The Leathernecks defense is led by their stellar linebacker play, and we've talked about Brett Taylor before, but he had an extra special group working alongside with him. Guys like Quentin Moon, who finished behind Taylor with 88 tackles and 6 TFLs, and Riggs Baxter, who collected 52 tackles and 3.5 TFLs. They give Western Illinois a lot of range and versatility at the second level. Not to sound like a broken record, but in the secondary we have yet another tie. North Dakota State and Northern Iowa boast really strong defensive back play. The Bison have 2 big-time ball hawks in free safety Trey Dempsey and strong safety Robbie Grimsley, and the duo combined for 11 interceptions. Junior corner Jalen Allison picked off 4 passes himself, while fellow corner Jalen Wimbush was strong in run support in addition to breaking up 9 passes. I like the depth across the board for Northern Iowa. Their safety play is extremely strong with Elijah Campbell and A.J. Allen. The Panthers dealt with some injuries last season, but studs like Tyrell Lyons and Malcolm Washington are now at 100% and ready to go. The Youngstown State Penguins get the nod for the best special teams unit. Punter Mark Schuler averaged 42.5 yards a punt with a long of 74. The 6'5", 250-pound sophomore got great hang time as well, forcing 13 fair catches and downing 28 punts inside the 20-yard line. Returnman Darian Towson averaged an impressive 11.9 yards per punt return, bringing 1 back for a touchdown, and he's also expected to fully take over the kickoff return duties this fall. In the 2017 NFL Draft this past April, we saw 15 prospects from the FCS get their names called, and many more have signed free agent deals in the NFL and also in the CFL. And this is shaping up to be yet another strong class in the football championship subdivision. And here are a few guys that you want to keep an eye on for the 2018 NFL Draft. The Missouri Valley Conference had 2 players selected in the 2017 NFL Draft. Both came from Youngstown State. They had 3 picked in the 2016 NFL Draft. So the NFL definitely knows that this conference stays stacked with talent. Taking an early look at some of the prospects in the Missouri Valley Conference to keep an eye on, North Dakota State's Nick DeLuca has that versatility to play inside or outside backer in a 4-3 or a 3-4, and I'm a big fan of that type of versatility at the second level. Wide receivers Jake Wieneke and Malik Earl are those above the rim types that add tremendous value inside the red zone. Tight end Dallas Goedert has generated a lot of buzz in the scouting community, and rightfully so. The 6'4", 250-pound tight end can win down the middle of the field or outside on the perimeter. He's ridiculously athletic, and most importantly, he's a solid run blocker, and you will definitely see the Jackrabbit tight end playing in one of those postseason all-star games in January. Free safety Trey Dempsey out of North Dakota State can play the deep third, but I think he's much more valuable as a slot corner or as a combo safety. I like his ability to hold his own in one-on-one coverage versus some wide receivers, running backs, and also tight ends. He also has the ball skills to succeed as a pro, and if you can turn the ball over, you're well worth your weight in gold. We've now reached the part of the show where it's time to go more in depth on what we can expect within the conference in 2017. New head coach Kurt Mallory gets his first head coaching gig and has some good pieces to hit the ground running in Terry Holt. I think his immediate impact will be felt on the defensive side of the ball. And the old saying goes, bet on what you know, and Coach Mallory definitely knows defense. Expect the Sycamores to be much improved on that side of the ball. Offensively, they have some talent at the skill positions, but the offensive line will be the biggest question mark of 2017. If they're able to run the ball, I think they'll surprise some people in year one of the new regime. The Southern Illinois Salukis will have the offensive weaponry to compete week in, week out. The biggest cause for concern will be a defense that gave up 30 points a game last year. Now, there are ways to get around that if you're playing complementary ball-controlled offense, and that's a lot to ask for an offense, but it's possible. The real hope is that despite losing some key pieces defensively, the Salukis will improve in that area. In Coach Nick Hill's second season, they are taking positive steps forward, but I still think they're a year away from making some serious noise. The Coyotes of South Dakota are another squad looking to get markedly better on the defense side of the ball. Statistically speaking, they were the worst in the conference. What they can do well is move the ball downfield on offense. Quarterback Chris Strebler is one of the exciting players to watch in football, and he will keep them competitive each and every week. What has to happen for them to reach the playoffs is that they have to get much better against the run. Last year, South Dakota gave up 5.4 yards a carry on the ground and 250 yards rushing a game. Those numbers led to them not being able to get off the field on third downs. If they can get better there, they have the offense to win some games. Keep an eye on Western Illinois this season. The Leathernecks figure to be strong once again along both lines of scrimmage. They have a strong QB running back combination and an excellent group of linebackers. That, along with their offensive line led by pro prospect Jacob Judd, gives you a lot of optimism heading into the season. The cause for concern will be the pass defense that has to find a way to eliminate the big play. The Leathernecks gave up 31 touchdown passes last season to opposing quarterbacks, so fixing that will go a long way in improving themselves defensively. Yes, they'll be breaking in some new wide receivers, but I think they can still be dynamic in that respect. It'll be important to get off to a great start because they have 3 tough weeks to start the season against Tennessee Tech, Northern Arizona, and Coastal Carolina. Missouri State could be classified as a sleeper team or a dark horse team to keep an eye on this year. They improved significantly last season, in which they played a lot of young guys. The question now turns to who will play quarterback, which is the biggest question that no team wants to ask entering the season. So whoever gets the start has pieces around him to work with and also has the benefit of having a strong offensive line. Defensively, the rush is where they have to get better. The Bears could not affect the pocket enough on either side of defense, both versus the run or versus the pass. And I would be more worried about that side more so than quarterback play. So we'll see how far they come September 9th as they face the power rushing team of North Dakota. One thing that you know about a Brock Spack coached football team is that they will both be physically and mentally tough. This year's Redbird squad will be a very tough defensive team as there are a host of questions on the offense side of the ball along the offensive line. Illinois State has a terrific quarterback in Jake Kolb, who loses his top wideout Anthony Warham, but still has 3 solid options in Christian Gibbs, Spencer Schnell, and Anthony Fowler to get the ball to. Another thing I know about a Brock Spack team is that they will have talent in the backfield. Illinois State gets a Missouri transfer and Ryan Williams to pair up with last year's tailback James Robinson, and how quickly the offensive line is able to gel could ultimately determine how high in the standings the Redbirds climb. Northern Iowa's 2016 season was an anomaly in my opinion. Head coach Mark Fairley is a great coach that can quickly get things turned around. Where the work has to be done this season, in my opinion, is on the offensive side of the ball. They have to get much more production out of both the quarterback and the running game. When the Panthers are rolling, it's because they dominate the line of scrimmage and run the ball down your throats. That didn't happen often last season, and the hope is that it does this year. Defensively, they suffer a huge loss with the disruptive Carter Schultz, but I still believe that they will be strong on that side of the ball. Obviously, it's tough to replace a guy with that much productivity, but the comforting thought is that they can still get pressure on the quarterback, which is to their benefit because they rarely miss an opportunity on the back end to turn the ball over. If they get more consistent offensively, they'll be back in the playoffs. The Youngstown State Penguins made the FCS championship game last season after a remarkable late season push. Obviously, the road to a repeat is always tougher. It's even tougher when you have to replace key contributors on both sides of the ball. This Penguins team will be offensively driven as they are talented at quarterback with Hunter Wells, and he's throwing to a veteran group of wide receivers. Defensively, you have the biggest cause for concern because the Penguins lose 2 NFL draft picks and quality starters in the secondary. Keep an eye on senior safety Jalen Powell. I think he's a special player, and they'll need his leadership on the back end. The good news is that they do get South Dakota State, Illinois State, and North Dakota State at home, and that defense will get an early test September 16th against Central Connecticut State in their passing game. South Dakota State has a ton of confidence and optimism heading into 2017, and who can blame them? Their offense is capable of beating you any kind of way, whether it's with the pass or with the run, and they return 9 starters. A lot of the focus will be on a defense that had some issues stopping the run last season. The Jackrabbits gave up nearly 4.5 yards a carry, which led them to not being able to get off the field on third downs. Stopping the run is about attitude and want to, and normally the Jacks are pretty good on defense, so we'll see what tweaks defensive coordinator Clint Brown can make up front to shore up the front lines. South Dakota State would love to get off to a great start and build some positive momentum heading into conference play. They open up against Duquesne at home, which will be a very tough game, and we'll see how better they are against the run as they'll face the 2016 Jerry Rice Award winner running back A.J. Hines. North Dakota State has a lot going for them as they enter the season. The Bison defense has studs at each and every level, and I'm a big fan of their secondary, especially what they have at corner. Offensively speaking, despite losing some starters along the offensive line, I think they'll be just fine at capacity. We've seen the Bison do a great job of reloading in the trenches pretty well the last 5 years. They will also be fine in the backfield. Like I said earlier, they are extremely strong in the backfield despite losing those 2 studs to graduation. What we will see different about this year's squad will be in the passing game. I think the passing game will be markedly better. With continuity comes consistency, and quarterback Easton Stick has his 2 top wide receiver targets back in the fold, and R.J. Urzendowski and Darius Shepard, along with his starting tight end, Jeff Illies. Things will be a lot smoother in the passing game, which will make this offense a bit more dangerous. Now, the winner of this conference will more than likely come down to the final weeks, but we should be in store for another banner year in the Missouri Valley this season. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and if you want to check out our other FCS season previews, visit our website at footballgameplan.com/FCS Kickoff. Also on iTunes, subscribe to Football Game Plan Podcast, where you can find our FCS Opening Drive podcast.